larger crop size for corn and soybeans in the United States. We are going to discuss all the repercussions of this with Jerry Gidel right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, the USDA increased the crop size in the United States for both corn and soybeans by reducing the harvested area but increasing the yields. Did you expect all this twist?
But it's very interesting. If you go back in history, and I've been throwing that up as my defense for a number that would be lower here on both of on the crop size, I should say, because of the fact that uh, we always seem to find a little less stuff in the bends. From there, the numbers that they came up with, interesting how they when naturally, if you reduce the number of harvested acres and still think you have so many bushels in the bin, all of a sudden that means your yield's going to go up on a per basis situation. I think that's really what hit the emotional point here today, that really just kind of hit things very quickly and followed through there for a good old hour and a half after the report was out. From there, then as we get to the end of the day, soybeans particularly here, they came bouncing back. Half the break that they had by the earlier in the day, and corn was stayed a little more defensive. But overall, the numbers, we ended up having over the 177.3 bushel yield. That's by the way, if you don't realize that, that's a record U.S. yield. And if you thought about the weather we've had in the first or this whole year, up and down, we had dryness, we had some rains, we had some more dryness along the way. And if you're going to reduce harvested acres, that suggests that you had some damage out there to the crop size and that. And so that doesn't really logically come together for me. It doesn't seem to bother them, or they wouldn't have done it at that point. But see, soybeans, particularly here, they were down here in this 245 million carryover stock situation. And if we went down a little bit on our total crop size, like I was looking for about 30 million down, they instead came up with a 30 million or 35 million increase, and boom, we went from a 245 up to a 280 on a carryover set. Now, wow, it wasn't going down, but 35 million up is not a treacherously high number. It's like, wow, all of a sudden we're 350 or 400. And the way the market reacted to it, it seemed a bit overdone. And by the end of the day, I think some people decided that being short this market for the long weekend could be just as negative as being long ahead of the report. So we had to bounce out of there, because really the interesting twist on it is that the USDA did not change their exports or crush statistics at this point. And interestingly enough, if South America, and particularly Brazil, you really wouldn't point a lot to Argentina about being in something that's, unusually tough, but, the having a reduced crop down there could mean some more demand for exports. So we could possibly pick up that 35 million pretty quickly here with expanded exports if the weather and the crop size down there continues to be on the negative side of things, on the soybean side of the issue here. So I think that really is a kind of a interesting twist in this thing. Now people accuse me of being bullish all the time, and maybe I am, but at this point, looking at these numbers, it's not as easiest thing to look at and say, "Wow, this thing is on the way to $10 or something. Do I think it's going to be a 16, 15, $16 market? No, but I don't think we got a lot of downside here if this weather situation, and we're going to get more evidence of their yield down there. They're really starting to pick up their harvest here. They were at less than 1% last week, and they seem to be about 2.5%. And I think that's part of the reason why the South American analysts are looking at the yields down there, because the yields they're getting, and rightly so, the first part of the crops this year is going to be pretty tough on that side of the issue.
Yes, but yeah, well, the USDA updated its projections for Brazil, but I think there are still many cuts to be done. The consultancies down there have updated the numbers today with 8 million metric tons of reductions. So there's more to come, and I'm not sure that Argentina is increasing its production at this time.
Oh, I agree on both those counts. We'd already had expectations of they were in the 155, 157 or range, a month ago in that situation when they didn't change. Then all of a sudden they were really in the 150 to 152 range. Now, in the last few days, there's been two analysts, and you just pointed it out, that are looking at 8, 9 million more off. Wow, all of a sudden we're having numbers down in the 140, 142, 143. I don't know if we're that far along just yet, but I think that the market's going to also realize that the uh, there's some downside yet to come, and I think that's part of the reason they were uh, less than defense, or decided they didn't want to be short over the long weekend, and we'll see what happens with this thing going forward. How many more reports we get out of Brazil and some tough yields, and that Mato Grosso has always been the garden spot. Generally speaking, if we get some more and more tougher yields, that's going to be tough or the market's going to have a hard time ignoring it. But we also have corn, and it didn't really have any startling information either.
Yes, but still in Brazil, in Mato Grosso alone, people are talking about of reductions of 8 million metric tons in that state alone. So there isn't any other place in Brazil that could compensate all of these losses. That's confirming.
Oh, exactly true. And if you think about what we've heard about the areas up there in the Northeast territories, Biafra and Tucumcan and things like that, they were even worse than what was going on in Mato Grosso over the last 6 or 8 weeks. So that's the thing is twist. There's where's this extra beans going to come from to compensate for Mato Grosso's loss? I totally agree. From there, the interesting thing about it though is that I think that we need to find uh other places that looking at the demand side in this thing, I think there's going to be some people looking to swoop in here and do a bigger buyer. China had been a buyer. They've been out of the markets for a while. That could be a signal that this is the time to get some basing going on and get a recovery going. But right now, I think we had a kind of a Friday reaction over ahead of a long weekend. At the same time, we had the numbers and we had less participation that wanted to be in the thing once that announcement was made. The twist of it is, even in corn, the corn number was on the its yield went up to 2.4, I think it was, something like that. And that's really even more startling, but they had a 560,000 less harvested acres there. And interestingly enough, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and also Iowa all had some slightly higher yields. Partly, some of that was because of reduced acres that occurred in how that you got to a higher bushel situation. But when we got to the um, end of the uh, road here on how many changes we had in the carryover stock, heck, we ended up had only an increase over expectations here of about 40 million. Well, I'll take that back. It was about 100 million over expectations, but 100 million in corn is not what a big number differences versus the trade average guess. And a similar situation is that the demand side on on the domestic ethanol was increased by uh, 50 million, and the feed number was also increased by 25 million. They didn't change exports, and I think that's kind of interesting that the exports were an increase. But as I said, this 100 million more bushels, we've actually said 75 million of that was already into further demand. So our stocks numbers month over month here did not skyrocket. And when you're at 2.1 or if you're 2.2, uh, you still got plenty of corn. So I'm not sure why you deserve to beat it down 8 to 10 cents. But as I said, that's sometimes what happens ahead of a long weekend.
Yeah, so yeah, next week is going to have only four market days. I want you to give us a little bit of perspective for both short term and long term. Longer term is kind of challenging right now because all of the geopolitical events that we are having that we can go very deep at this time, but it seems like a perfect storm for farmers because we have higher prices and lower crude oil prices.
Well, that's part of the reason why we had some weakness this last week. And that's a good thing to point out. We had some pretty weak crude oil prices, and that kind of weakened things up until Thursday. And then we had exports that weren't too spectacular either, but we did bounce late in the session Thursday, and then ahead of the report we did from there. No, and it is a really quite a, as they say, minefield out there on looking at the economic worlds at this point. From there, the issues in the Black Sea. They're slowly reducing some of Ukraine's output between them having to be really cautious about their Black Sea shipments, so they're moving them down towards the Danube and things of that nature, so they don't have any issues there. Europe has not really embraced the idea of them shipping a lot of stuff across their areas there, particularly the farmers of over there said protested a lot of different gateways into Poland and other countries, and that and then from that point, the interesting twist on it is that we had a quite a different opinion about what to do with the U.S. Outlook for wheat. This year, some people came in with the attitude that it's going to be a 900 to a million acres or so down. We had a 3.5 million increase last year. It was totally off the charts. That's what helped bring the total wheat crop down to some extent. We didn't have the great yields and we didn't have a huge crop, but then turning around and say, oh, well, a $2 break in wheat prices in the US, they'll still plant it. Yeah, they didn't. It came in 2.4 or 2.3 uh, or so on that versus this 900. And so that's another twist of it here as we look at what the producers are going to look at. I think that, we had some significant setbacks, all in the plain states, which does limit some of the alternative things they can plant. We had like 600,000 in Texas. We had 500,000 down in Kansas, 250 down in Oklahoma, and I 200, 250, something like that, out of Colorado from there. But Kansas is an area that definitely they can look at sorghum, they can look at corn. If they get some moisture, they can look at beans. There situations in Colorado could easily look at some corn. There's a lot of feeding out there from that point. Texas, sorghum is one of your bigger alternatives, but there's a lot of talk about cotton out there in the world. South America is looking at it at this point. I don't know how much, West Texas wheat ground has a lot better chance of being cotton ground than anything else, but that's a long ways away. But in reality, is that they made a choice not to plant it this fall, and I think that's another indication that we could have a big change in the U.S. corn acres and more towards soybeans, and that. And I feel like that if this demand structure stays together here on the bean side of things, we could end up still having numbers a lot closer to 220 carryover stock, and maybe whittle down some of this corn with some ad additional corn sales and movement here if South America's crops don't come through. And it's 50-50 on some of that stuff in down there in Brazil.
All right, we'll catch up again next week.
Exactly. Well, everyone hopes everyone has a nice holiday. Right now, there's going to be a lot of snow around the Midwest and moving towards the East Coast, so you better get your car gassed up before the weekend, there, guy.
Yeah, we are ready for that.